What's up, big dog? Saber TCG here with something new to the channel. And I'm kind of wanting to do some more how-to stuff on the channel just to help some either new players or more advanced players learn some decks that are coming up in the meta or been here for a while. So here's the start to my how-to series. In this how-to series, I'm going to be breaking down a bunch of these decks that are big meta contenders, maybe some not so much meta contenders, but definitely breaking down decks and how I feel about what their future is, how they're going to perform, or how they've been performing and what it means for the future of these decks, right? Definitely want to have a vision of having these videos for beginner players, but also to help advanced players get a little bit of an extra oomph to when they're deck building or trying to pick a deck or whatever it may be. Want to make sure that you're prepared for these bigger events that are coming up and that you can perform well. Or maybe you're deciding, I don't know which deck I want to play. Let's look at this how to and let's see, what's some key strengths to the deck, what I think I like about the deck, maybe what could perform well at the X event. So this is kind of what this video series is going to be. Every couple weeks or so, I'm going to be uploading a new deck, and I'm also going to be doing a starter beginner video here soon where I just break down the deck in general for beginner players. But as I want these videos to be for beginners, I will say this. I will be doing a lot of niche things about these decks and breaking these decks down to a more of a competitive style video. So if you are a more beginner player, I definitely hope that you'll check out that beginner series that I am going to be starting here soon. But that's not to say these videos won't help you, because if you're wanting to get better at the game, this is definitely where you need to start. We're going to start, of course, with Dragapult EX. This is the deck I've had the most time with, I would say, and definitely the most success I had. I did day two the Pittsburgh regional just a couple months ago. Not a great day two placement. Still a day two though, so we'll take it. Can't complain. But definitely have played this deck a lot to know what I'm talking about. And you may be thinking, well, Trey, you're not really a pro player, so why should I listen to you? I think it's really important that we gather a bunch of different perspectives, especially when we're preparing ourselves for a bigger event. It's very important that you get as much out of other people as you can when it comes to deck building, deck choices, things like that, so that it's just not your tunnel vision of how you feel about a certain deck. I've talked to plenty of people about this game, and a lot of people have very specific ways they think about this game, and I think it's important that we try to broaden our horizon with that. So if you're interested in playing Dragapult EX, or maybe you're interested on how your deck lines up against this deck, this is the video for you. I hope you all love it and enjoy it, and please make sure to leave a like and comment, and let me know about some suggestions. What's some more videos you all want? What's some more educational content that you all are wanting with these videos? Because I'm going to be making them quite often, like I said, just about every other week. So please let me know how you feel about the comments. So let me know how you feel about this video in particular. Is there something you'd like me to add in the future? Is there some things you're wanting to see from the channel? Just things like that. And again, of course, I appreciate you big dogs and all your support that you all give me. But let's go ahead and get into this video today. And we're going to be going over, of course, Dragapult EX. Dragapult EX is a stage 2 Pokemon with 320 HP, a dragon type. Only has 2 attacks. It is a Terra, so it does have that Terra specification that it can't be damaged while on the bench. But only has 2 attacks, no abilities on this Pokemon. The first attack, of course, she had Headbutt. For a colorless energy, does 70 attack, or excuse me, 70 damage. Not something you're going to use often, but it does come up. You'd be surprised. But the main attack we're going to be focusing on is that Phantom Dive. For the fire energy and the psychic energy, does 200 damage, and you get to put 6 damage counters on your opponent's bench Pokemon in any way you like. So if you want to put 1 on this Pokemon and 5 on this Pokemon, do it. If you want to put 4 on this Pokemon, 2, do it. If you want to do 1, 1, 1, 1, on all the Pokemon, do it. You have that choice, and they're damage counters, so it's not just damage itself. So the shamans and stuff like that don't stop this attack. That's very specific to this. So just be on the lookout for that when you are deck building against the Dragapult. As you can see with the placements of this list, or excuse me, this deck, regional top 8s have 100. This is when I started this PowerPoint. It may have gone up since then. but including 13 wins and international top 8's 27, including 3 wins. So this deck definitely has performed exceptionally well. This has been a deck that's been in the meta for a while now, and it's something I definitely want to look forward in the future for, because once we have these mega Pokemon, it's going to be a lot harder for us to knock out these Pokemon with the high HP counts. So we're going to be looking into that today, seeing what we think we have upcoming for the future for this list, how we think that's going to perform with this Mega Evolution set, and then so on further from that. But as you can see, if we use history for this deck has performed exceptionally well. It did have a rough start, just because you didn't have a lot to pair with it. A lot of people were playing the Pidgeot with it when it first came out, kind of trying to be that Charizard EX type deck, and it just wasn't working. Now we have the other techs that really helped this deck, like the Dustor, like the Monkey Dory, even some supporters that we've got here recently, like the Hilda, that's really pushed this deck to perform even better. So definitely a deck that has performed exceptionally well. As far as when it comes to the list that you can play with Dragapult, there's really only 3 lists that I want to even like consider looking at. And that is, of course, the Dragapult Dustor, the Dragapult Zard, and then just the pure Dragapult, or some people call it straight Pult, but I prefer calling it pure Pult, as it's just the purest version of Pult you can play, right? So, as you can see, I've listed some lists on Limitless. Please check that website out if you haven't. It's a really good source for getting decks and just deck building in general. I've pulled the top list from each that I could find here recently. That includes the World Championship 2025, the Justin Newdorf list, the Monterey list with the ZardPult with the RF Gomez piloting that list, and then the Kita Arai Pure Pult list from Frankfurt, where it was more of a pure version. This is really the 3 main ways you can play the deck as of now. There may be a new way to play in the future, but this is kind of what we're looking at now. And more people have really leaned towards the Dragapult Dustor, even though we found some counters to that list, including the Side Duck that recently came out. But definitely a deck that has performed exceptionally well. So as we take a little bit further dive into the list, let's look at the matchups. And this is all coming from Limitless data and Trainer Heal that we've taken from and then kind of put our own spin towards it. So the notable good matchups that we want to talk about, especially in this meta, is the Charizard. The Charizard list has only gotten better with these megas coming out. Kind of doesn't affect Charizard, and also Charizard can really benefit on taking the 3 prizes. Makes their game escalate a lot quicker. And Dragapult has a really good matchup against Zard. It's always had a really good matchup. Just being able to bully the Charizard on the bench, knock out the Charmanders and the Pidgeys, and just keep them off from getting any momentum towards their deck progression. It really helps that we're moving damage counters onto these baby Pokemon and knocking them out. And then the second one I want to mention is most road decks. Dragapult really does so well against these decks that you're not really expecting to see, but you're going to come up and play against. For example, the Alakazam deck really struggles with stuff like Pult because you're knocking out the baby Pokemon off the bench with either the damage counters that you're putting on with the Dragapult, or popping your Dusknoir or Dusclops and putting the damage onto these bench Pokemon. You really can't afford to lose stuff like that with these road decks. And Dragapult just really helps with knocking out these Pokemon and really slowing them down. The whole point of the Dragapult list is to play at the pace that you want to play and make your opponent also play at that pace. And if you're constantly knocking out the starting parts of the deck, then they're going to really have a hard time and struggle with that. Also, the EV box. This is just kind of a like EV box, and sometimes like don't really want to say the Raging Bolt list struggles, but it can, and also the Terror Box version can, even though it's a notable bad matchup. Just these lists that play the owls, because you can snipe the owls late in the game and prevent them from gaining any momentum late in the game, and then just kind of running over them. So any deck that really needs their bench to be safe um, are going to struggle against Dragapult because Dragapult's going to go after these Pokemon and make sure that the pressure's put on you when they're ready to play. Of course, notable bad matchups include the Gardevoir. This deck has just always struggled with Gardevoir. It really sucks because Gardevoir has been such a titan um, for ever since it came out, honestly. The deck's just good. It's always been good, and it's going to only continue to get better with time and with age. And then it did not help that the Gardevoir got this Lily's Clefairy EX, which with the Fairy Zone ability, the weakness of your opponent's Dragon Pokemon is now in play is now Psychic. So kind of like that Fairy counter if you play the mainline games. Just really affects the Gardevoir matchup because your Dragapult just isn't safe ever. Kind of what you can do with a lot of these decks is you can kind of rely on your Dragapult with 320 HP having a chance to survive most hits. With the Clefairy, it's just impossible. You have to play a certain way against Gardevoir, and it's just not a way that you want to play. And then with the Terror Box list, the Terror Box, of course, with the Wellspring Mass Ogerpon, we can counter this with the Shaman, but the Shaman isn't consistent as we want it to be. And that's because we have the Torrential Pump. You may shuffle 3 energy attached to this Pokemon into your deck. If you do, this attack also does 120 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So kind of the same instance of what Zard has against us, where we're knocking out and preventing that momentum buildup for this list. The Wellspring Mask Ogerpon also does that to us. If you knock out 2 Droopies, it's really hard to recover with that Torrential Pump, just taking out the one that's in the active and maybe the one that's on the bench that you're trying to protect. Also, with Dragapult, where we're trying to keep energy on our Dreepies and Drakelokes before we get to the Dragapult, if they knock out something with energy, it's another turn that we're behind unless we have the Neo Upper, but we only have that play once, so we have to be very careful when we play that. Um, so the Terror Box can really affect us. And then also the Grimmsnarl. And a common theme with the Grimmsnarl and the Gardevoir is the Monkey Dory. These lists are very heavy on the Monkey Dory, and with that Adrenabrain ability of once during your turn, if this Pokemon has any dark energy attached to this Pokemon, you may move up to 3 damage counters from one of your Pokemon to one of your opponent's Pokemon. So it's really nullifying that Phantom Dive attack that we have, and it's really making it hard to get those knockouts on those baby Pokemon that we're trying to get for those high prize turns. Of course, with Dragapult, though, if you are a Dragapult player, that you know that technically your deck has quite a few bad matchups, but in theory, if your deck does what it's supposed to, you can mitigate those bad matchups. And that's, of course, with the Dusknoir, or if you play the Zard helps with the Gardevoir, or if you play Pure, you're going to play that more stall tactic to hurt some of these decks and prevent them from going forward to win the game, like the Terror Box. So there's ways that we can beat these decks, and there's definitely key cards that we play to beat the key tech cards against us. As you can see here, the only one that we really struggle with is the Lily's Clefairy. There's not a lot we can do except make our bench space small, because the Full Moon Rondo does require you to have a bunch of bench Pokemon to do quite a bit of damage. But if you're playing a primary Psychic list, then it's not going to matter because all those Psychic Pokemon are going to have the weakness. But if you play like a Terror Box and they play the Lily's Clefairy, there is a way to mitigate that attack. But again, I think Dragapult, and you may see these bad matchups and be like, well, why would you play this list? Dragapult has a good way of dealing with its bad matchups because we have things that cover that for us. And let's get into one of the lists and just take a look at it. So this list, of course, is the Pult Dustor deck list. As you can see, we're playing a high count of the Ghost. What we're trying to do in this list is we're trying to put a bunch of damage counters on the board so that we can get high knockout turns and then just kind of win the game maybe in a 2-turn span. Playing the high count of the Droopy and the Dracloak. If you don't know, the Dracloak is our main draw engine in all these lists with the Recon Directive. Once during your turn, you may look at the top 2 cards of your deck, pick one to put in your hand, and then put the other one on the bottom. And then, of course, with the Duskull and Dusclops, we're doing those Curse Blast abilities. Dusclops does the 5 damage, Dusknoir does the 13 damage, It helps us with the +6 damage. We're going to get a bunch of knockouts everywhere, right? Then one of the MVPs that have recently came out for Dragapult is the Badoo. Now the Badoo is with the Itchy Paw ability. If you don't know what Badoo does, you know, God help your soul, because it only goes downhill from here. The Itchy Paw attack that does 10 damage during your opponent's turn. Your opponent can't play any item cards from their hand. It just completely item locks you. You can't do anything about it. You just have to either mitigate the Badoo by knocking it out, by moving damage counters, or just attacking it, or they're going to keep attacking you and just slow you down. The whole point of Pult is to slow down your opponent to where you can build up an oppressive board that prevents your opponent from playing any further, and then you get these big turns where you're knocking out 2 to 3 Pokemon, right? And then, of course, we're going to be playing the Blood Moon Ursaluna EX just to get that late game attacker. A lot of times we'll get in a game situation where our Dragapult 200 can't finish the game. The 240 is just enough sometimes. Or our Dragapult gets knocked out. We don't have a way of building up another Dragapult because of the energy count or because of it's a stage 2. So we have the basic Blood Moon Ursaluna to kind of finish the game out for us. And then another big MVP for this list is the Holucha. When you play it, the ability with Flying Entry, you put 2 damage counters, or a 1-1 split on 2 different Pokemon, or up to 2 different Pokemon. So you can put one here and one there. And then that, a lot of times, these 70 HP basic Pokemon, we can put them at 60, which allows us to knock it out with the 60 damage from the Phantom Dive. Really important card. I encourage everyone to play this card. Of course, we also have the Pheasantipede EX with the Flip the Script ability to draw 3, the Latios with the Skyliner that allows us to retreat basics for no cost, and then the Shaman, like I was talking about earlier, with the Flower Curtain to prevent all damage to your bench Pokemon from attacks that aren't Pokemon EX or Pokemon V. So that helps us from getting that Wellspring knockout on our bench Streepy with energy so that we can continue to play the game forward. It really helps us with that. So that's kind of the primary list of Pokemon you're going to see. You're going to see some other Pokemon that are going to come up in other lists, like we play the Monkey Dory and the Maractus. We'll get to those as well in the pure version. Um, and then for your supporters, here's kind of the typical supporter list you're going to see. We're, of course, going to be playing the 4 Iono because we are a comeback deck. We're going to be playing slower. So a lot of times our opponent's going to be ahead of us in prizes. And because of this, we're going to want to Iono them to make their hand smaller and our hand either bigger or replenish our hand. The Lily's Determination, of course, also helps us because we don't take a lot of prizes at once. Or when we take prizes, it's either to win the game or win the game next turn. So a lot of times we're going to be playing the game where we have 6 prizes. That gives us the benefit of getting to draw 8 cards instead of 6. The boss's orders, of course, we need to swap up our Pokemon sometimes, and we need to use that supporter. For doing such and not be able to use the counter catcher, sometimes it doesn't get to come up. But the boss's orders allows us to switch Pokemon and then do damage to it. And it's a lot of times how we're going to stack damage on a bunch of different Pokemon so we can get those big turns. The Hilda, like I mentioned earlier, lets us search for an evolution Pokemon and then also lets us search for any energy. It's really big when you want to play a like rare candy play to Dreepy from Dragapult and then attaching the Neo Upper. Or if you already have one of those pieces, allowing you to get the Dusclops or the Dustor to build up your Duskull so that we're protecting them from getting damage done to them by either other Dragapults or anything else that can go after our bench Pokemon. And then the Professor Turo scenario, there's a lot of corner type abilities that prevent us from retreating right now and in either attacks or just a bunch of different ways that prevents us from getting away. And we don't want any of these support type Pokemon to be stuck in our active. So the Turo scenario allows us to get that out. And then we are a stage 2 list. So we are going to be playing the 4 Buddy Buddy and then the 4 Ultra Ball. 3 counter catcher because we want to be able to move Pokemon around without using our supporters. And again, we're going to be behind on prizes quite a bit. So we want to use that with the counter catcher. 2 Night Stretcher. Night Stretcher is an overall valuable card to us, especially because of the low energy count. the 2 rare candy, because again, we are a stage 2 type list. We want to be able to do those aggressive plays when they come up. The 2 jamming tower to prevent the Pokemon tools that are pretty big against us, like the Bravery Charm that prevents us from getting KO sometimes. And then you'll have other things like the Hero's Cape, and maybe you even want to turn off like a Sparkling Crystal for the Terra Box player so they can't just Wellspring you. We play a relatively low energy count, and this is due to our Pokemon not needing a lot of energy to attack. We only have 2 attackers in this list, which is Dragapult EX and Blood Moon Ursaluna. Both of them are either going to be the 2 energy with the Dragapult, and then Ursaluna, you never really want to use it until either the season skill allows you to use 1 energy or no energy at all. So we play the 2 Psychic, the 2 Luminous, the 1 Basic Fire, and then of course the Ace Spec, which is the Neo Upper, which counts for 2 if it's an evolution type Pokemon, which allows us to do that Phantom Dive for just 1 attachment. So, the notes for Pult Noir. Let's take a look at it. There's 2 ways to play this list. It's either to play it slow and methodical like, which is probably the preferred way, is probably what you should do with the list, or a more aggressive approach with rare candies. I prefer the candy versions more. I like to play more aggressive, but I think Dragapult flourishes more when you're playing a more methodic like type version. So it really just depends on how you want to play the list. And also, these versions will differentiate per the meta. Maybe there's a meta that you need to play more aggressive, or maybe there's a meta that you need to play more slow. Right now, the meta is play more slow than aggressive. If you go to Limitless right now, most of the Pult lists are probably only playing 1 candy, 2 candy, or even no candy. And this is because they prefer to play that more slow, methodical pace. I just prefer to play the rare candy versions because I like to play more aggressive. That's not to say that's the correct way or what you should be doing in a more optimal state, but definitely feel that part of the game and feel which part you enjoy more, right? And the really important part of playing the list is knowing that your matchups well enough to know when to pop your ghost. So you really need to know when the right time is to use that Curse Blast ability. A lot of Dragapult players that I play against will just pop the Dust Skull or the Dust Snore and then put damage somewhere. And maybe you're thinking a couple of turns ahead, or you're trying to get an aggressive knockout, and it's just not good. It doesn't help you win the game. They're more worried about getting the prize cards than just winning the game, which is a very funny way because that's how you win the game, right? Is getting the prize cards, all 6 prize cards. But if you only get 5 prize cards, you don't win. So it's more important that we try to win the game with these abilities than try to take prizes. We're not an aggressive style deck. We need to play slow. We need to know when to build up and when to do these abilities so that we get the big prize turns so that we can win the game. And then, of course, be careful playing Ghost in the Mirror. A bad Duskull play can lead to you losing the game. So when we're playing that mirror, of course, we know the Duskull is 60 HP. That's given a prime target for those Dragapult players to knock out our baby Pokemon, whereas the Dreepies are 70 and even like the Hawlucha 70. So we want to make sure that we're being careful when we play Ghost in the matchup. I've actually had someone tell me to not play Ghost in the Mirror, and I don't think that's correct. I think you need to play them. I think you just need to know when to play them. Most turns should take 3 to 4 prizes or win the game with this version. Don't be afraid to fall behind. If you're taking only 2 prizes in a turn, it better be a very specific reason, because this list really wants to take all of its prizes at once, or it wants to take a large amount at once and then finish the game with your opponent being able to not get out of it. Kind of like a checkmate scenario, what we want to put on our opponent. I think Hilda specifically in this list is the best. Hilda in other lists, you're probably going to play 1 or maybe not even play, but this list, I think 2 is very good. You need to experiment with those numbers, of course, but Hilda's really good specifically in this list because you can also get your Ghost if you already have pieces to your Dragapult. You need to Badoo to slow your opponent down. Build damage around the board if able, and then take the big prize turns. Badoo's really going to be able to slow down your opponent, so you need to rely on it. Yeah, it kind of sucks because it's an item lock, right? But Badoo's there for a reason. We want to slow down our opponent so we can build up our board so that we can take these big, impressive turns all at once. So rely on stuff like that to slow down your opponent. So let's also get into the ZardPult deck list. As you can see, we are still playing a 1/1 line of the Ghost, but it's technically not Ghost. It's only kind of to cap off the damage or to win the game. With this list, we're relying on that Charizard EX with the Infernal Rain ability, which allows us to put 3 basic fire energy when we evolve into this Pokemon. Um, as you can tell, the fire energy is a synergy for this deck, and also the Charizard is able to do that dark damage to those psychic Pokemon that we really struggle against, like Gardevoir. Um, so for that matchup specifically, this helps us with the Gardevoir matchup. Playing around the same type of ratios, except we are playing the Charizard line here. We are still playing the Badoo. We're also playing a Monkey Dory to move those damage counters around because we have 2 big Stage 2 Pokemon. There's a lot of times our opponent's not going to be able to knock us out in one turn, so we're able to move that damage around. And then you're losing some of your more standard supporters like the Latios and Ursaluna because we don't need them because now we have 2 different attackers with the Pult and Zard instead of having the Pult and that's it. The supporters are pretty basic as well, except in this list we are playing the Arven. The Arven's very important for this list because sometimes we get trapped with some of our Pokemon and we want to get to that air balloon. We also play the Unfair Stamp in this list because the Unfair Stamp is able to slow down our opponent when they take out these knockouts. Excuse me. Because we're going to be playing quite a bit slower with this version because we don't have the ghost to kind of put pressure. So our chained attacks are going to be what we're relying on, not the pressure from an attack and a ghost pop with Curse Blast. So we really want to slow down our opponent. I don't know how I feel about Unfair Stamp right now, especially with everyone running Iono, Lilies, and Research. I think there's too much draw support right now for Unfair Stamp to be good, but definitely need to check it out. And then, of course, we're playing the Super Rod because we want to be able to put energy back when we need it. We still have the Jamming Tower, and our energy looks quite a bit different with the 5 Fire and 4 Luminous because we don't need the Psychic. We can just attach the Luminous for our Dragapult, and then the Fire can be attached by the Zard. So just a couple notes for the ZardPult. This version has the best Guardy matchup, but because of that, we're trading some consistency because we're playing 2 Stage 2 Pokemon. So it's going to be a lot harder for us to build up our board because we're trying to build up 2 Stage 2s, not just 1. This version requires you to build up two stage Pokemon to compete. Make sure to prioritize which Pokemon best wins the matchup you're against. So, like I mentioned earlier, because we're building up these 2 Stage 2 Pokemon, we need to know which one is we're going to rely on to win. If you're playing Guardy, you're probably going to be relying on the Zard, right? But if we're playing against like the Charizard, we probably need to rely more on the Pult. So we need to understand our matchups and what the best attacker is for those matchups. Now, we are a lot weaker against the decks that snipe the bench. You may want to consider some ways of protection based on the meta. So in this version in particular, we are a lot weaker to that Wellspring attack. So maybe we need to play a Shaman. Maybe we need to play something that like a, Lively Stadium's been really big here lately. Maybe we need to play something like that to get a stadium bump and protect our basic Pokemon. I definitely wouldn't recommend that way of protecting your baby Pokemon, but that's just kind of some ways we have to think about this, right? Because we're trying to prevent that momentum stall that our opponent's trying to put us on. This version does not struggle with energy placement, which is very nice. A lot of Dragapults struggle with putting into multiple energy because you have to have 2 specific energy, which is why we play the Luminous, but we can't have 2 Psychic in our hand and be able to use that to attack with a Pult, right? So with this version, because we have just the Fire and Luminous and we're putting the Fire on with the Zard, it is a lot easier to get our energy built up in this list, which is very nice because that is something that you will struggle with Pult. You will have turns where you're like, where's my energy at? Why can't I get my energy? I can't attack if I don't specifically draw an energy this turn. And this deck just doesn't struggle with something like that. But of course, the trade-off is consistency. And then, as I was mentioning before, probably need to experiment with multiple ace specs. I'm not really sold on the Unfair Stamp. The Unfair Stamp probably has a chance to be good in the future, but I think right now, Unfair Stamp with all the draw support that we have, I just don't think it's really good right now. And then Last but not least, we have the Pure Pult deck list. Pure Pult, you're going to be playing a higher amount of the supporter Pokemon, like the Monkey Dory, for example, just because we're going to be playing as Dragapult as our main attacker. We are back to playing the Latios and Blood Moon Ursaluna, and that is because we are back to only having the one attacker. I also think for the Pure Pult list, definitely experiment with key tech cards. The Keto list that I mentioned earlier, he's playing Cornerstone because it helped him with the Godango matchup. So this type of deck, you have experimental options to put in to kind of counter the meta. When you think about playing this list, you really need to think about being like a stall type player or a kind of anti-meta player because you're wanting to beat other meta deck options with this list specifically. And that's for one reason why we have the Maractus, which has the corner attack that prevents our opponent's Pokemon from retreating and does 20 damage. And then if they do knock it out, they get an extra 60 damage on top with the Exploding Needles ability. Another way for us to get damage counters. And then where we have the two monkey door, we're going to be moving damage around constantly. So just kind of a way slower approach to the deck. The version I definitely don't prefer playing is this version because I just, as a player, and I think it's important that we understand what type of players we are because as a player, I just don't like sitting around. I like to be progressing the game even if I'm losing or even if I know I'm going to lose. And this type of deck just doesn't do that. It kind of just sits and waits till the exact perfect time to do something. It's kind of more of an optimization to your time, and I just not a big fan of that. But there's definitely been success with this list in particular. And then with the supporters, we're playing quite a bit more supporters because we're playing that more slow, grindy game. So we're playing like the two research. We're not playing the Hildas. We're playing the two Brock scouting because we don't want to be under an item lock ourselves. And we want to put those baby type Pokemon on the bench as quickly as possible. And we're also playing a high supporter EX list with the Fez, Latios, and Ursaluna. The Turos, of course, to get stuff out that we need to get out. And then a higher count, excuse me, of that gust-like ability with the boss, the three boss and three counter catcher. Then everything else is pretty standard. We're playing the additional Luminous because we are playing another monkey. Notes for the Pure Pult. This is, of course, like I mentioned, the slowest version of all the decks. You really rely on your stall Pokemon to get this list going. If you have the mind to play stalled, you definitely need to consider this version. It's important that, again, we know what type of player we are. So if we think we're a more methodical, slow approaching player to the game, we probably need to consider this version if we want to play Pult. When you play Monkey Dory, you feel at times that your energy restrictions are tough. It's hard to attach to a monkey and set up energy on your Dragapult line. So as I was mentioning earlier, you are going to have energy struggles with this deck in particular. Adding an additional monkey just makes it harder because you really want to build up your monkeys. So if, for example, if you need to attach an energy this turn to attack, but you would also like to move around damage, you don't really have that option in this list. You really have to be careful with your energy placement and when to put energy on a Pokemon at the right time. Iono and Lilies, of course, thrives on the top of the list that you're playing a lot slower. You're not taking as much prizes as the other list. So you definitely would recommend trying 4 and 4. The list I showed you earlier has 4 and 3, but definitely recommend you trying 4 and 4 and see what the correct ratio is because you're going to be in a lot of positions where you have 6 prizes until the game is over or about to be over. As I was talking about with the Turos, if it becomes more popular due to stall-like tactics, this version may not be strong enough. So this version does kind of rely on stalling out your opponent with those corner-like abilities, but where we're getting more corner-like attacks with the new Yveltal, the Soblock, Control Pidgeot kind of being a big thing, this may not be the best version if people are more prepared for stuff like that because they're going to be playing more Turo-like effects or maybe like jet energies or stuff like that. So we need to really make sure we have a good grasp of the meta before we pick our meta cards. And I also would not recommend this version for beginner Dragapult players. I definitely think you should play one of the other two versions first. kind of get a good feel of the deck, and then maybe go to transitioning to this version. Excuse me. Um, because it does require you to think a lot more forward of the game and more forward in your turns. Um, but again, this list has, like all the other lists, has had success in the meta. So it's not like a list that's bad. It's just a list that is going to require more thinking towards the future turns, not just what you're looking at and what you're currently trying to beat. So here I'm going to be showing you kind of it's a little bit of an older video of mine, but I'm going to be showing you kind of a game plan towards what you want to play as Dragapult. Want to kind of take a view and, see, well, this is how you should be playing, so on and so forth. But let me go to 1.5 here, or we can even go to 1.75 and just kind of show you all, kind of the game plan of what we're looking at when we're playing these matchups. I may even speed it up even faster. We'll go to 2. I mean, I can pause when needed. But, of course, we want to go second in this list. As you can see, this is a little bit of an older list, so we won't have, like, the Hilda and stuff. But, as you can see here, opponent kind of struggles. But we are establishing those 2 Dreepies, and then we're playing the Badoo as well. It kind of looks like we have our Dusk prized even. So that's something to note here, that, sometimes that is going to happen. You're going to have 2 Duskull prized. But as you can see, we're just building up our Drakelokes to be able to draw and get to those cards like we need to. Going to try to, right now, what we're probably trying to do is get to energy so we can attack with Badoo. But, of course, that doesn't always happen. So just kind of going over, trying to think about what I want to do here. I decided to take the Brock Scouting, as I want to be eventually getting rid of it to go into another Drakeloke. So you may think that 1 Drakeloke is too much, and I promise you it's not. I probably got greedy here and attached to this other Drakeloke, thinking I would find something to allow me to treat, probably at this time the rescue board. I obviously did not get as lucky. So I probably should attach the energy to the other Drakeloke. But I also see that my opponent is struggling here, so I'm probably just trying to end the game. But here in a second, you will see what my opponent is playing, and he is playing the ZardPult, which is something that I want to be able to take away their momentum. So I'm wanting to do all that damage to these Pokemon on their bench. So I'm trying to build that up as quickly as I possibly can. And as we see, they're going to just do an Evo play to evolve, to get those Drakelokes up. Again, it's important for all these decks that play the Dragapult line to get their Drakelokes up. It's very important that we take as much time as we can to get to that, because what we want to do is we want to be able to draw as many cards as we possibly can in the turn without necessarily having to use a supporter. So let's take a look and see what I decide to do here. Of course, I'm drawing more cards, just trying to find stuff in my deck before I play any of my supporters, so I can play as much cards and optimize my hand as much as possible. It looks like I'm not getting a lot at the moment, but we'll see what I decide to do here in just a second. Go ahead and get that Dragapult. And then I do decide to use the Turo, and I decide that the more important play here is to go after those type Pokemon on the bench instead of being in like a lock. So what I'm debating here is how to use my Hawlucha, or if I want to lose my Hawlucha, right? And I actually decide not to use the Hawlucha, because I kind of want to put pressure on both his Drakelokes, and this kind of puts him having to have the rare candy to get to the Zard. And I don't want him to have to draw off this Pheasantipity, because I notice he's struggling. So that's another point with the Dragapult list, is knowing when to take your knockouts, because when we're playing stuff like the Pheasantipity, we want to make sure that we are not allowing them to draw stuff, because we want to play at a pace, at our own pace, right? As you can see here, our opponent, unfortunately, Did have the rare candy to the Zard, which does suck, but as you can see, it's not the end of the world. We definitely find our way around it here. Um, as I'm thinking about what to do. And as you can see, I'm bringing up that Zard, and now I'm using the Hawlucha now to get the knockout on the Fez, and then I'm also going to get a knockout on this Dracloak. Um, so it just makes my um, play even better, right? Because now he definitely doesn't get to draw because I decided to take the Fez this turn instead of last turn. Or, excuse me, take a knockout this turn instead of last turn. Because if I knock out the Zard or the Charmander, yeah, he doesn't get to do the Zard play. But now he's stuck on these 4 cards and he better have something good. Or I'm just going to run over him as I'm going to get another knockout on one of these Dracloaks as well. And then I'm also putting 200 damage on the Charizard, so he can't really get away from me now. He's stuck, and I have a play to win next turn if he doesn't get to like a Dragapult. But as you can see, playing the Hawlucha on his end, doing a research, so he did unfortunately have a supporter to get out of his hand, and he is going to retcon. Really, he's just trying to get to a Dragapult so he doesn't automatically lose next turn. Even drawing additional cards with the Fez. We're at 5-3 prizes right now, so I'm at advantage. And unfortunately, he does unfair stamp me. Gets to what he needs to here, and at this point, I'm probably mauling because he had the unfair stamp. If I know myself, uh, but here's the benefit of having those multiple Dracloaks, right? Because now we get to draw additional cards, even though we just got unfair stamped to 2. As I'm looking at my Discord, because I have a nice stretcher, I could either nice stretcher for an energy here or a nice stretcher for another Dracloak if I have the energy and if I have the Dracloak. I don't think I have the energy, so I end up going for the Dracloak and putting it on the other Dreepy. And then, of course, just continue to look for cards, end up deciding to go for that research so I can get as much cards as I possibly can. Um, and I end up moving damage to, guess what? Win the game. And that's all it took. Just took 2 turns, and that's it. That's the game. So just, a methodical way of trying to find the game-winning play. I knew I needed the Monkey Dory to move damage to those baby Pokemon that he ended up playing. What he probably should have done is not play those Pokemon, but he did have the Hawlucha play because he was probably setting up for the Dragapult route. So it's just another way of thinking about the game. Yes, I could have knocked out the Charmander, but, he would have drew more cards. Maybe he gets to the Dragapult. Maybe he plays the Neo Upper, and then he just has 200 damage on my only Dragapult, and now I'm in trouble. So it's definitely important that we understand when to take prizes, when to not take prizes. Fortunately, I didn't get to show you all how the Ghost performed because my Ghosts were prized, if I'm not mistaken, in that game. But just to go to show you that, yeah, it's important that we take prizes, but it's also more important that we know when to take prizes. All right, guys, just some key moments, just kind of to wrap it up here, that I just wanted to kind of go over with you all, just so that we have a better understanding of how or what information we just gathered. Okay, just some key notes to end here, just to kind of gather our thoughts. Kind of went over a lot of information, so of course, feel free to go back to the video and look at anything that you may want to you know, go over and cover again. But this is just kind of some key notes that I definitely want you to take away. I think each version has its merit to play. There's definitely reasons to play each version. You should play the best one based on the meta. Right now, that is the Ghost version with the multiple Dusk and doing the Curse Blast type of ability on your opponent's Pokemon. But definitely go over the meta and figure out which version is the best before you decide one. This is, of course, a comeback deck. You will stack your prize turns to be either 3-3 or 4-2 if possible. Sometimes you don't have that luxury, but you definitely want it to be this way. Like I showed you in the previous video, we done a 3-3, even though we could have done um, a 1 prize turn that very beginning. We didn't want to allow our opponent to draw from Fez, and we prevented that by doing the 3-3 line that we did. This deck has a lot of power plays, No matchup feels unwinnable, but the deck requires you to play very clean and efficient. So with these type of turns that we were talking about earlier and playing clean and efficient, we want to make sure that we're playing as optimally as we can in our turns because we do have those bad matchups that we're trying to beat. We can beat the Guardies, we can beat the Terror Boxes, we can beat the Grimmsnarls. We can do it. Our bad matchups are not unwinnable, but we definitely requires us to play clean. And even in your winning matchups, it requires us to play clean because this deck, um, it doesn't have a lot of room for error. You place an energy at the wrong time, and it can lead you to a loss. You take out knockouts when you're not supposed to, and it can lead to a loss. So it's important that we play optimally with our hands. This deck isn't necessarily that hard, but if you mess up quite often with this deck, you are going to pay for it. Unlike some decks that you can mess up here and there and it doesn't matter as much. It's also, of course, important that we learn how to play against our bad matchup cards in general. So, for example, making your board smaller when you play against the Clefairy, playing the Shaman at the right time when you're playing against the Terror Box if you play it, so on and so forth. We have these tech cards that are against us in this meta. We need to know when to play cards to negate those key tech cards against us. Badu is very important to establish. You'll need to make your opponent play your pace. As you saw in the video earlier, I didn't get to Badu, but I knew my opponent was already playing at a slow pace, so I didn't really need to. But there's going to be points in the game where your opponent is ahead of you and you need them to slow down, you need them to take a breath, or you need them to not get to that key stage 2 Pokemon or that key card that they're trying to get in their list with that's an item, and you want to play the Bidoof. And then, of course, for the ghosts, don't just pop your ghost because you have them set up. Wait for the right moment. You want to make sure that you're popping ghost exactly when the time calls for it. If you're not popping them at the right time, you will pay for it. All right. So, as for a deck rating, I'm going to be going over deck ratings out of 5 stars for all of these categories for each of my videos. We'll have a consistency, matchup spread, draw power, attack power, and the recovery. Consistency is how consistent is your deck? How easy are you to find those key cards in your deck to win the game? How easy is it for it to establish your board? For the Dragapult list, we have it at 4 out of 5 stars. This deck is consistent. It's very consistent. Other versions may deteriorate that consistency, but overall, the Dragapult version that you're going to be playing is going to be consistent. Matchup spread. So, as we saw, we kind of have quite a few bad matchups. So, that does make our matchup spread at 3 stars out of 5. And that is because we have good tech cards to be able to beat our matchups, or our deck is just so powerful that those bad matchups aren't the unwinnable spreads like the 70-30 matchups or the 80-20 matchups. It's more of like a 55-45 or 60-40. So the matchups are definitely manageable, but we do have bad matchups. Of course, draw power, how often you get to draw cards and how often you're seeing cards in your deck. That's, of course, a 5 out of 5 stars. The Dracloaks are just so good. They provide so much draw for your deck. You're going to see a bunch of cards with this deck. So that's why it is so good. The attack power, we are going to put it at a 4 or 5 stars. The attack ability with the Phantom Dive is good, moving the 60 damage around. The only thing that really makes our damage kind of whatever is that we are stuck at that 20 mark. We can play some cards like the Defiance Band that helps us with some damage numbers, but overall, 20 attack, especially for more of a mega centric type of meta, is going to affect us. And the attack power rating of 4 or 5, I definitely could see going down. As far as recovery, the recovery is how easy it is for you to set up your board again after it gets either broken up or you lose Dragapult or stuff like that. Recovery, we have a 4 out of 5. We have a lot of good options because we are sitting on a lot of Dracloaks to just play, an energy Dragapult, be able to attack again. We play the Neo Upper that allows us to put 2 energies for 1 attachment that helps us with that energy deficiency that we have. So we do have that at a 4 out of 5 stars. Overall, I put this deck as a 4 out of 5. I think this deck is still very solid. Definitely may have some more losing matchups coming up if these Mega Pokemon get better. But as of right now, this deck is still a Titan. it's still going to win you games. It's still going to be at the top tables of events. So it's definitely something that you should consider either playing or playing against. I do think the difficulty is a 3 out of 5. This deck is not the easiest deck to play. It's not the hardest deck to play, but it's definitely important if you want to be playing at that upper level that you understand how important it is, when to play cards and how to play them efficiently, when to take prizes, and so on and so forth. I think the ceiling for this deck is, of course, S tier. We saw previously with all the placements that this deck has performed exceptionally well, and I think this deck is still going to be up in that S tier echelon, A to S tier. I think the ceiling is S. Will it meet its ceiling? You know, who knows? It may not meet that ceiling, but I do think the ceiling is at S for the Mega Evolution. We'll just have to see what comes further down the line for this deck, but I do think this deck is primed and ready to continue its dominance of the meta. So that's it for Dragapult. That's kind of everything that I wanted to cover today. I appreciate you all for tuning in. Of course, leave me a like, comment, subscribe. Let me know how you feel about these deck type videos. Maybe something you think I should add for the next video. Maybe some things that you could critique. Or maybe you don't agree with exactly everything I said. Let me know down in the comments, you know, how you feel about this deck, where you think this deck is going to perform for the upcoming metas and the upcoming tournaments. Definitely, I'm curious to understand what you all are seeing with this deck. Because like I said earlier, it's very important that we all get an idea of how this deck plays and we get all of our opinions together before we formulate an actual good opinion for these decks. So thank you all for tuning in, watching, and peace. We'll see you. Thank you all for tuning in to another Saber TCG video. I appreciate all the love and support you all give me. You all are the best. I really appreciate everything you all do. Leaving likes, comments, subscribing. It really helps out the channel, and you all have been doing that here lately. And I just want to come out and say thank you for that. And want to encourage you, I guess, is the best way to keep doing that and to join our real small community we have going on in Discord and my socials. I really appreciate, again, all the support. Want to continue to grow my content here and continue to be a better player and also a better person. I hope that you can join that journey with me too. But again, appreciate all the love, support. If you have any suggestions, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to just be able to continue to throw out content for you all. Just whatever you all like to enjoy is what I want to do, and I want to help us all grow, right? So appreciate, again, I may say this a billion times this video, but appreciate all the love and support. And we'll catch you in the next one. We'll see you, big dogs.